quick note. I've been working on this script since 2022, so please forgive me if it sounds like the ravings of a mad woman. They are, but that's neither here nor there. Let's just move on, yeah? So this original script was written before the DLC came out. I'm just going to read it as is, and then I'll modify it afterwards with the DLC, as if you, bought it and downloaded it for yourself, so that'll be a little treat. Radagon, the god Marika confined to a mortal coil, fundamentalist of the Golden Order, and staunch adherent to the principles he discovered therein, worships gold and hates his red hair. Though it does not seem it at first, this is an inherent contradiction, as it is entirely possible his red hair comes directly from his connection to the very grace of gold which he holds in such high esteem. To explain, let's first begin by talking about something else associated with churches. Stained glass, particularly rose windows. There are few colors as vibrant as those of stained glass windows in medieval churches. They contain a startling variety of hues, from deep blue through vibrant green and bright, saturated red. However, the techniques used to develop these windows were not as intuitive as one might think. One might, for instance, infer that they were dyed or that colored glass was in some way painted over after the fact. In fact, ancient stained glass is one of the earliest examples of nanochemistry. Metallic powders would be mixed in with molten glass, encouraging widespread nucleation and confining the metal into nanoparticles, which, as a result, imparted a characteristic color to the medium. For example, blue stained glass can be created by adding silver to the mix, green from copper, and notably, a deep ruby red by mixing in gold. Gold nanoparticles, so formed in the glass-making process, remain confined and dispersed as the glass cools and solidifies. Having done so, the stained glass acquires the properties of plasmonic gold nanoparticles, including a bright ruby to wine red color, as well as some photocatalytic properties. These photocatalytic properties potentially lead to very specific atmospheric chemistry inside of churches, equipped with these windows, as they produce electrons which, when in contact with volatile organic compounds, also known as VOCs, and these are incidentally quite bad for one's health, these excited electrons cause them to decompose into inert CO2 gas, confirming the plasmonic nature of the nanoparticles to this day. Effectively, if you go to an old enough church and find a red enough window, you can bet that window is going to be made with gold nanoparticles. The only question is, how does this red color emerge from gold? And why does it need to be nanoscale for this to occur? What's more, how can this help us understand the connection between Radagon and Marika, the engineers of both the shattering of the Elden Ring and its attempted repair? To elaborate, I should briefly explain what a noble metal is. See, normally, metals are known for their conductivity, which is the mobility of electrons in a metallic medium, their luster, reflective appearance, and other properties such as malleability, their ability to be hammered into a sheet, and ductility, to be drawn into a wire. These electromagnetic chemical properties are associated with the physical nature of the metallic bond that holds metal atoms together. The nuclei, due to their relatively weak attractions to their outermost, or valence, electrons when compared with nonmetals, share their electrons broadly in a great sea of electrons, anchored by a matrix of metallic nuclei. The weaker the attractions between the nuclei and their valence electrons, the easier it is to move the electrons around however you wish, leading to characteristic metallic properties. For instance, a metal's lustrous appearance comes from the fact that its scattering is largely delocalized in terms of electrons, not localized. This instead permits transmission of visible light into and out of the metallic matrix of nuclei, which can then form reflective planes, as mentioned. It's kind of like being inside of a pool of water and looking up, and you notice that not all of the light is making its way out because it's been warped and reflected to the sides. Furthermore, when metals react, they can lose these properties, and in doing so, tarnish, which can be observed in the form of opaque substances coating the metal, normally an oxide, as oxygen is the basis of the oxidation series, thus the name. It really just means that it's very happy to accept electrons, and as mentioned, the metal is kind of swimming with electrons, so this is a very agreeable situation for both of them. Iron oxide, for example, is what we know as rust, and copper oxide, copper green oxide, is what we know as verdigris. So what then is so special about these noble metals? I thought you just said one of them can tarnish. Well, for one, they resist reactions of all varieties, except for, some really extreme ones. or just leaving copper out in the sun at all. Definitely not in the presence of water. Why did you make a whole statue out of it? And possess the highest possible degree of conductivity available short of superconductivity, which is minimal resistance compared to zero resistance. The term noble for the metals comes from the way that they are generally unaffected by chemical stimuli. Insulated, or sheltered, if you will. Now, since noble metals are so highly conductive, their electrons flow with great ease, encountering minimal resistance. These particles, being highly conductive yet nanoscale in diameter, have a finite region in which to conduct its share of electrons, and so cannot do so to the degree it normally would be capable of which, in order to lead to the emergence of its standard physical properties. See, when metals conduct electrons, they're not actually sending a single electron all the way through. The electrons are bouncing off either end basically all the time. This is what's called Brownian motion. As long as it's a non-zero temperature, everything's going to be shaken around constantly. Fun fact, the disorder of higher temperatures is also why electronics get worse at higher temperatures. Think of these as, instead of a great ocean of electrons, maybe a small glass, or at most a swimming pool, maybe a wave pool. The idea being you kind of changed its resonance structure, and in doing so, it's no longer producing waves like it normally would, where you've got the whole moon thing working. I don't know how to describe that. Tides? Here, look at this duck diagram. You decipher this for me. In either case, unlike a tube or like a superhighway where you're putting the electron in one end and it just comes out the other very quickly, it's closer to a queue or a stack with like a bunch in a pile, like gumballs. Where you kind of feeding one in the top and then another comes out the bottom, and you really can't tell what color that gumball's going to be. So the size of that gumball machine, that itself is a limiting factor. And that is going to then determine the color of the light that nanoparticle resonates with based on its conductivity. In this case, we could call conductivity, say, it's got smaller gumballs. Higher conductivity means it's got smaller gumballs. It can fit more gumballs in, is what it means. It's a terrible metaphor, I'm so sorry. Oh, the fireworks have started. Crap. Happy New Year! Electrons are very similar to water in this way. They tend to flow in and out of a metallic medium, which allows the electrons themselves to carry along and transfer their vibrational energies, which leads to the conductivity of heat as well as electricity. Conductivity, then, is a measure of how efficiently the electrons flow through this metallic matrix. The less resistance they meet along the way, the more efficiently the electrons are conducted. The more resistance, the greater the vibrational energy buildup as obstructions are encountered and overcome, like water flowing over rocky shoals, leading to a buildup of thermal energy and a resulting increase in temperature, which, as mentioned earlier, will then further increase the disorder of the electrons, further increasing the resistance, and explaining why noble metals are so highly valued as conductors. We can imagine these noble metals as a great ocean, or, in the case of wires, a flowing river with a smooth riverbed, and minimal bends in the path of its flow. Likewise, when nano-confined, one can imagine small vessels filled with fluid, such as cups or basins, and can immediately see the difference. One may channel its flow along the entire breadth of its container and dissipate all forms of flux therein, while the other has only certain frequencies with which it can resonate, or form stable waveforms with inside of its medium. All other frequencies that are forbidden would result in destructive interference and an incoherent state of agitated fluid, rather than coherence of flow in a clearly emergent frequency of oscillation. That's essentially what's happening when noble metals are confined to nanoparticle form, rather than its normally broad spectrum of reflections, which lead to its luster. They only have a certain number of wavelengths at which they can absorb and emit light, leading to the properties associated with plasmonic nanoparticles instead. Gold in particular begins to absorb and emit at a bright red hue when nano-confined, the peak of which shifts further towards the red end of the spectrum the larger the nanoparticles become, ripening into a deep wine-red color. The associated photocatalytic properties come from the fact that these nanoparticles contain oscillating electron clouds, induced by the absorbance of light at the particular wavelengths which are compatible with the nanoparticle's size. In effect, its diameter is a multiple of the wavelength at which it's resonating. As the light wave, itself a form of electromagnetic radiation, begins to resonate with the electron clouds contained within, so too do some electrons begin to become excited, thus causing the emission of certain characteristic wavelengths of light. If these bands of excited electrons instead come into contact with a reactive material rather than being allowed to relax back from the excited state by emitting these photons, these hot electrons can instead perform photocatalytic chemistry, using the energy of incident light to overcome reaction barriers that are normally inaccessible and, in the case of the aforementioned VOCs, decomposing these organic compounds into CO2 gas. In short, this phenomenon can be viewed both as a process of absorbing light to emit certain wavelengths thereof, and or as converting light energy into electrical energy for the purposes of generating small amounts of plasma, thus the term plasmonic. The connection to red will be readily apparent, though other observations with respect to the plasma generated via this process will have to wait for later videos. Gold, in this manner, is inherently linked to red. Furthermore, ancient cultures as far back as Rome were capable of leveraging this technology, even if they lacked a scientific understanding of the reasons for the process. This can be seen in the case of the Lycurgus cup, pictured here, which can be observed emitting a bright red color when irradiated with light from behind, while it demonstrates a greenish color when looking at it head-on, as green is what's left when red is absorbed from broad-spectrum incoherent white light. Even if Miyazaki and George R. R. Martin were unaware of the significance of aligning gold with red in terms of nanochemistry, it cannot have escaped their attention in terms of how often its chemical properties have been utilized for mythological and religious purposes throughout recorded history. In short, it's patently ironic that Radagon hates his own red hair because, if anything, it is indicative of his indelible connection to the grace of gold that he worships, rather than his disconnection therefrom. While he shares this trait with the giants of the Fell Flame, who is to say they aren't also connected to the grace of gold in some fashion? After all, the eye of the fell god appears to be made of molten gold. But that's a topic for another video, again. For now, I'll leave it here, with the statement that all those who bear Radagon's red hair are just as closely linked with the grace of gold as those with the lustrous blonde hair we see on Marika and her other offspring of the golden lineage. They're simply confined, much like the rune of destined death, which, interestingly enough, is also red in hue. What better way to be directly associated with the Golden Order than to bear the consequences of this confinement on the crown of one's own head? A crown of red rather than a crown of gold, fit for a being deeply associated with the shattering of the Elden Ring into fragments and golden dust. Dust which, if imbued into a medium such as molten glass, or, in this case, one's own hair, might produce the characteristic red hue we see throughout the lands between. Hi, my name is Jenny Azoth. Welcome to the other video. To kick things off, let's start with one of those good old-fashioned item descriptions, shall we? Aspects of the crucible. Bloom. An aspect of the crucible discovered in the ancient ruins. Creates a Miranda flower, also known as a rune flower, on one's chest before calling down a rain of light. Charging increases potency. In an age long past before this land was enshrouded in shadow, the vitality of the crucible flourished. This incantation is naturally found next to a Miranda sprout in the Rao ruins. Interestingly enough, this incantation is in an area where you need torrent to get there, so you need the power of horns to reach that place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I've already explained a bit of how red works with plasmonic gold, but this is the part where I'm going to step aside and actually show you the video. So let's do that for a moment, shall we? Alright, so we've got a solution. We've got a stir bar. It's heating, it's stirring. And into this gold precursor solution, once it's boiling, we're going to be putting some sodium citrate solution as a reducing agent. Alright, so, person running the lab added the citrate. You can see the color slowly starts to darken. There's the purple color, and now it's turned quite red. And it continues to turn even redder as time goes on, to the point where it becomes almost entirely opaque. Kinda neat, huh? Does that remind you of anything? Any sort of, I don't know, connection between red and gold? Is that a bear? Let's look at beast blood first, shall we? Fresh beast blood glinting with gold, found by hunting carnivorous beasts such as bears. This glimmering blood never rots or decays. Chest armor of the red bear, whose name is lost to madness. A vest reinforced with iron rivets. After killing the great red bear in a blood-soaked bout, he became fascinated by the untainted glory of its naked strength. I wish to be a bear, no more and no less. And Roar of Rugalia, the incantation of what is jokingly called the Bear Communion, channels the power of Rugalia, the great red bear. Transform oneself into a great red bear and emit a mighty roar. Charging increases potency. An incantation that is more akin to the divine invocation of the horn scent than it is to the dragon communion. Only through desperate battle with the feral wild can one discover a god unique to oneself. This roar is clearly related to the Spiral Tower incantations. I will take this opportunity to note the connection between runes, bears, dragons, and flowers. And of course, lest we not forget, rings. The runes are what the ring is made of, yes? So I've already mentioned that the beast blood's gold causes it to neither rot nor decay. Now let's discuss rings of spectral light, a sorcery practiced by the keepers of the spirit graves, where all death ultimately drifts. This creates rings of spectral light that fire in unison. The rings of light have the same qualities as ghost flame, and deal magic damage while also causing frost buildup. Let us contrast this with Radagon's Rings of Light, one of the incantations of the Golden Order fundamentalists, a gift of gratitude to the young Miquella from his father, Radagon. And yet, despite this gift of a ring, young Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Millennia's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. Now, when I mentioned in my previous video, shout out to the Worm Guy video, that Miquella basically abandoned everything in an attempt to refine some sort of offering to the greater will that could summon a star, but not one so substantial that it would lead to the creation of new gods. You see, Miquella appears to be quite invested in staving off the influence of outer gods by the judging of Miquella's needles, the Needle Knights, everything about Lita, and we can also look at the multi-layered Ring of Light, an incantation of those who served Miquella, which produces a multi-layered ring of golden light and fires it forwards, inflicting continuous damage on those struck by it. So what does this imply? Well, we've got the spectral rings of light, and we've got ghost flame. We've got there an implication of life being recycled back into light through fire, and that light being similar to the moon's, which presumably is similar to that of the primordial current, which, that was what presided over the world before the Golden Order. Since the Golden Order can be provably, I'm not sure if I mentioned this explicitly in the Worm video, it's definitely in there. Feel free to check. But since the Golden Order can be explicitly made up from the ingredients, golden, which is whatever Marika was at the point where she offered herself at the Divine Gate, and order, which is the beast that came along from the greater will to consume her. Together they make Golden Order. This means that gold itself was alloyed, doesn't it? That means that gold was mixed with something, was mixed with order. So what Miquella is trying to do is unalloy gold, which is to say, to remove order from gold. Can you see why Miquella sought out the Land of Shadow yet? Here you can find the roots of the Crucible, where the ruins of Rau are overflowing with the abundance of gold that used to be before this land was enshrouded. Oh, I should have mentioned this in the Worm video. Auxin, A-U-X-I-N. When I mentioned Aspen, Auxin. Here's the tag. Auxin. Remember that word. It's a good word. So basically, before these lands were enshrouded, the Erd Tree did not exist here, and this land had its own gold. It was overflowing with it, and the characteristics of that gold also overflow in this land, and that is why, from the Crucible, you would notably have bright red hair, and it's also quite notable that you might be gigantic. Talisman of all crucibles. A giant mass of intermingling crucible attributes. Reduces damage taken from critical hits and headshots, and improves the effectiveness of rolling and backstepping, but also increases the damage taken at all times. Rumored to have sprouted upon giants, and is known as the Mother of Crucibles in ancient tower lore. I suppose we've tied it back to the ancient tower with that, haven't we? Now, what do you suppose a tower made of gold would look like before it's finished being built? I get the feeling it would look bright red. So here's the part where I'm going to have to pivot a bit, because there's two reds. I mentioned this earlier, and this is where it comes in. So there is the red of gold that has just been formed. Yes, that is the crucible, and it's cooling, as if it is molten gold, right on the cusp of finally cooling down and becoming metal once more. So you could see how that would, kind of like water, sort of form droplets that would eventually coalesce into a puddle. There you have your red turning into gold. But when does gold turn into red? Well, that's kind of a different process, isn't it? That is when you dissolve gold with aqua regia. You see, back in the time of the ancient dragons, two dragons once fought. One of them was filled with flesh of gold and had armor of rock. The other had flesh of flesh, and for some reason their lightning, instead of red, was some sort of angry orange-yellow color. Now I wonder what that could represent. It beats me. Either way, what we know now is that one of them is capable of dissolving the other, and we immediately understand the stakes of their battle. That one of them is seeking the gold of the other. One of them is seeking to eat the other alive. Can you see why Placidusax feels a little bit raw about this whole deal and sanctions Dragon Communion? I kind of can. Can you also see why Dragon Communion burns with a strangely wine-red flame? Funny how these things connect, isn't it? Similarly funny, you get golden yellow eyes for a couple of reasons. One of them is succumbing to the frenzied flame, and the other is to Dragon Communion. Dragon Communion doesn't really have a cure, but interestingly enough, Frenzied Flame does have a cure, directly connected to the dragons, and to Miquella's needle. Huh. I wonder if there's something going on with that. You see, Miquella's needle is formed out of a spiral. That spiral is said to be sacred for a couple of reasons, but if we investigate the spiral directly, the spiral is a normalized crucible current that one day will form a column that stretches to the gods. How will the red crucible be expected to reach the gold of the gods unless they're both gold? Unless red is literally just what a budding horn looks like if a horn is to be made from gold. You know, there's something I've been thinking about for a while, which is the connection of horns to gold. Because, to put it bluntly, in the lands of shadow, horns are always associated with gold. Except when they are associated with silver. So what exactly happened in the eternal cities of the Nox that caused them to have one of their skies be destroyed by an incoming star, malformed or otherwise? A malformed star named Estelle came along and broke their sky, didn't they? Do you think Marika sent that star? Or do you think the Greater Will did it? You see, I believe the Greater Will actually isn't a will at all. I believe that all of this is a grand misunderstanding of the tensions between red and gold, and I believe that lies at the very heart of Elden Ring as well as the worms. Just as much as fundamentally, really. Kind of like one of them being nerves and the other being blood, yeah? Speaking of blood cells, those are round, right? So, why do you think the Greater Will's only representation has ever been a circular silhouette? A rune? A microcosm? The High Priest hat. The hat of Count Ymir, High Priest. The circular design at the top represents the greater will and its lightless abyss, imparting increased intelligence and arcane to the wearer. Though Count Emir instructed R'Lana in the sorceress arts, he abandoned his allegiance to the moon. It was merely the closest of the celestial bodies, nothing more. Like Marika, let us return to the shaman village, and behold the outer god heirloom's origin, a talisman engraved with the lore of an outer god. Raises arcane. The clan, who lost everything in the Great Fires, peered upon the corpse of their ancestor, normally an act of sanctity, and saw in its shadow a twisted deity. The clan had suffered such torment that the horrible thing was taken as an object of worship. I believe this connects us directly to the divine beast dancing lion, which, instead of an item description, let's give a unit description, shall we? Divine beasts are messengers of the heavens, and their rage mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. When the Impaler's army assailed the tower, the ritual of the lion dance was turned towards martial ends, its divinity, its fury, its light-footed beauty. I will note that the Impaler's army certainly used a great deal of flame, didn't they? Did Marika seal off the Lands of Shadow when she returned to the Lands of Shadow, only to find them burned down? Only to find that her village was destroyed? That... Oh, God. Oh, God. Anyways, let's not think about that one too hard, and let's think instead about the 4 elements. How are you surprised by this junction by now? You fought the Divine Beast. Come on. You know that it's got 4 stages, and each one of them is a different element. You know that each one of the outer gods is also themed after one of the elements. You know where I'm going with this, right? You know what horns do, right? Right? Please tell me you know what they do. Why do you think the horns glow blue in the presence of that fucking ancestor beast that's also bright blue? Huh? Horns are goddamned antennae. They're connections to other realms. They help you become part of another divine being and allow them to channel themselves through you. The divine beast dancing lion is like Kirin, which I guess I have to explain a couple of things now. So, first, let's quickly take a detour and talk about suns and alchemy. I promise this will be worth it. Take a nice look at the Shadu tree in the meantime. So, the black sun can refer to the first stage of the alchemical magnum opus. In a text described to Marsilio Ficino, 3 suns are described: black, white, and red, corresponding to the 3 most used alchemical color stages. Of the black sun, he writes, the body must be dissolved in the subtlest middle air. The body is also dissolved by its own heat and humidity, where the soul, the middle nature, holds the principality in the color of blackness all in the glass, which blackness of nature the ancient philosophers called the crow's head, or the black sun. This is used to illuminate the dissolution of the body, a blackening of matter, or putrefaction, or rotting, in Splendor Solis, as well as Johann Daniel Mylius's Philosophia Reformata. Gonna take a moment here to note the green lion consuming the sun, a common alchemical image seen in texts such as the Rosary of the Philosophers. The sun being a metaphor for aqua regia, the green lion consuming matter, the sun, which is gold. And, yeah, look at that. It's a beast biting down on the golden sun, and there's that golden blood, the yellow blood, gold blood, red dripping down. Gold blood, which is also red. Really, it couldn't be clearer. And this is why alchemy is the science that succeeded, and it definitely didn't get renamed into chemistry. I will note here as well that suns can correspond to gold, which includes citrinitas, as well as nobility or incorruptibility. Now, citrinitas is also known as xanthuos. I don't think I need to say any more there. Literally, a dude all wrapped in yellow wraps, running around using red fire. Do I need to say more? Come on, his head's even a snake. It's just like that one guy, Salza, the Sage of the Fire Knights. You know, the Rain of Fire guy? Which, I'm going to take a little sidebar and just mention that Salza was known for two things, which is burning more villages and scorching more land than any other, which is noted in the Rain of Fire incantation he invented. And the other notable thing is that he refused to burn down a specific old ruin at the risk of his own life, and he can be seen defending Rao ruins from you. Isn't that fun? Wonder what's growing under that hood. Definitely not a snake, right? So to make a long story short, when it comes to Kirin, essentially there is a horned unicorn that's kind of also like a dragon that's made of, well, a dragon, a phoenix, a tortoise, and a tiger. Each of these represent the 4 cardinal directions as well as the 4 primary elements, and this is why we can see the dancing divine beast made up of all 4 of those. And as you progress through the fight, each one of those stages comes out one at a time. For instance, the Deathblight stage represents earth, while the lightning stage represents fire, the snow stage represents water, and the wind stage represents air. There you go, that's all 4. I find it additionally notable that you can find horns on the horses of the Crucible Knights and their armor. Anyways, getting back to Rao. Fire Knight armor, distinguished by its red cape and twin golden snakes which adorn the neck, enhancing incantations of Mesmer's flame. These were the only ones who truly knew Mesmer. His flames, like serpents, the painful fate that accompanied his accursed form. Why do you think they would make those snakes, which are meant to represent fire serpents, if I understand correctly, out of gold? Where do you think that intuitive understanding comes from? And they definitely knew about Rao. Salza over there was nearly killed defending it. So what's going on with this? Was there a schism in Mesmer's forces? I find it quite notable that Salza can be found literally with a snake inside of their head, like growing out of their head or somewhere, wearing the Fire Knight armor that has golden serpents wrapped around the collar to remind them of the burden that Mesmer carries, right at the gate of the ancient Rao ruins, which have an indelible connection to the Crucible, which is assumed to be only connected with fire and therefore with red, but I would posit here with gold as well, not to mention their resemblance to horns, which, as we know, is pretty much the most important thing that you can have in this society. And did that schism echo through to the point where red became just taboo? Like, did people split off and defend the Crucible, and that became a taboo thing? And so red became a taboo, even though it's already inherently part of gold? Is it so ass backwards that they actually tried to remove red from gold? There is, evidence of this, too. The primordial gold stuff is pretty much all collected in places where you would expect the Erd Tree to have hunted them to extinction. They're cornered. Yeah, they're in Everjails, or they're in ruins. And by ruins, I mean Stormvale, not necessarily Rao, but I realize now how that could be misleading. There's an interesting phrase that keeps being used when it comes to the Flame Serpent. I'm going to start with Mesmer's Flame Seal, the Fire Knight's Seal, my bad, Sacred Seal of the Fire Knights, who answer directly to Mesmer the Impaler. The emblem of Mesmer's army depicts a golden ring and the fire of his sacred seal. Now, we were discussing earlier how rings can sort of depict that cycle of life from abundance into rot and back again. And that fire can be used to turn life directly into light, and in doing so, move that cycle. You might see how burning things in a cycle where you want everything to remain static, the same, would become sacrilegious. You might also see how during a time of warfare where you are trying to change things in the world, it might be a boon, something you would carry around and represent actively. And I believe this ended on the mountaintops of the giants, according to the First Church of America. The whispers that she left there, with Melina. You know the lines. Hark, brave warriors. Hark, my lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance has delivered ye through ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden ring for the age of the Erd tree. Now, how would she feel if she herself was one of these giants? If she herself had red hair? If she used fire? If she knew that gold was also bright red when it was newly formed? For instance, someone made of gold, if they were a god, and if they were iterated into every layer of existence at once because they'd become a god, they would know that if they were reborn, the stump that they were born into to start growing again would probably have red hair. Interesting how red is both associated with fire and with rot, with sin and with outer gods. I'm beginning to think that it's almost inverted, that gold is the strange thing and we're on the inside looking out, that this gold is so conductive that it renders itself utterly transparent, that we are inside a bead of it, and that if we were to zoom all the way out, our solution would appear wine dark. So, if gold is everlasting, but red is new gold, why would she seal off the crucible? What exactly would she have to lose from new gods? Why would she be so invested in becoming God herself? Do you think that it was all a grudge against the horn scent and their golden tree? The great tree? Which would, over time, become enshrouded by oxen, emitted from the bottom of the Erd tree's leaves, which had been implanted into it, which grew out of it, as if the black sun consuming the citron. I always wondered why the Erd tree seems to emit that sort of gold hue, but you can only find the actual sun in Rao. I obviously didn't always wonder why you could find the actual sun in Rao. What I mean is I always wondered where the actual sun was and how the Erd tree is masquerading as that, how it stands in. How is it stealing valor from the sun? And I think I figured it out. It's got to do with this plasmonic gold stuff. The gold is literally capturing the sunlight, and once it is grown big enough, it can turn gold and stay gold, and it's quite durable. But if it's nano-sized, it's still red. Therefore, red represents a golden empire in its nascence. Like the Mogwin Empire, with a seed of gold by the name of Miquella, no less. Wow. I'm kind of impressed by Mog's plan. It's oddly well thought out. The dude set out to become a dragon, and, he knew what he was doing. You gotta give him that. He knew he needed blood, and he needed gold, and he knew to expect to have lots of horns, and that would be a good thing. And also, if horn come back and hit eye, well, maybe you could, pray to the blood star. The blood star is definitely a part of that, right? Right? I've mentioned the blood star, right? So, to wrap up, let's discuss the blood star, which is obviously going to be our other red, yeah. We've got one red that's made of solid gold and another one that's made of liquid blood. There you go. There's your connection. And I wonder if there's a connection between this red and where the gold came from. Let's see. Briars of Punishment. An aberrant sorcery discovered by exiled criminals. Hold on, I feel like I've seen those criminals' hoods somewhere. Maybe Dominula? And the God Killers. Oh, that's a whole other video. Come on. Be serious. Wounds the caster with thorns of punishment, sending a trail of blood thorns running over the ground to impale enemies from below. The guilty, their eyes gouged by thorns, lived in eternal darkness. There they discovered the blood star. I wonder if Moog discovered that too. In the name of the Formless Mother. And I wonder... See, there's one last thing that's bugging me. These jars in the castle can do this one blood spell. It's kind of freaking me out. Because that's a jar saint transforming the terrain. And the transformation is by liquefying it into blood. Now, if your blood looked like tree sap instead, wouldn't that be gold? Just saying. Kind of grim when you think about it, that's all. Now, where have I seen thorns before? Does that have anything to do with the Shaggy tree, do you think? To do with being abandoned by gold and the outer gods, do you think? It's probably nothing. The gold has no connection to red whatsoever. I'm just raving. Oh, so the frenzied flame is yellow in the center and red at the fringes, and the red is where the flame is cooling down. When the flame cools down, it turns red. So you mean to tell me that this flame is acting like the crucible? And it's producing a gold-like substance. Is it melting gold? Is that what we're seeing when we see frenzied flame? Is it literally capable of melting gold? But how does madness only affect tarnished then? Does it only burn gold? I need a moment. Radagon, could you entertain our guests, please? Okay, so I think that's going to bring us back to Rykard. See, the Volcano Manor is the only place in the Lands Between where we can find that same heat that we would associate with the Crucible. It's kind of odd, since we would expect to find that elsewhere, wouldn't we? We'd expect to find that inside the Crucible, at the top of the mountaintops, yes? But, kind of looks like that's moved elsewhere. And I find it interesting that we can find a piece of a serpent. And here as well, we find an effort that is a recusant effort to the Erd Tree. It recuses itself from gold. How can they recuse themselves? How are they able to opt out? Well, my answer would be they have a serpent of their own. They have lava of their own. They have a world engine of their own. They have a crucible of their own. And so they have the beginning of their own tree of life. It's quite alive. It eats people. But nobody's perfect. Point being is that either one of these traditions should be referred to with equal amounts of horror. If you're going to subsume people who die in the Lands Between and either doom them or forcibly reincarnate them over and over because the gold tree remembers them and keeps spinning them out, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say even if Godwyn wasn't that giant when he died, dude still dodged one hell of a bullet. Oh my god. Like, golden hair can only go so far in a world where literally you're just going to get resurrected over and over and relive the horrors of an eternal life while everyone around you either completely remains the same or fades into oblivion, and you can never get to know anyone new ever again. You only know your family now, because your family are the only real people now. Yeah, I'm beginning to see why Ranni helped Rykard. Ranni helping Oh, come on, you must know this one. Blasphemous Claw. A slab of rock engraved with traces of the Rune of Death. It can deflect the power of the Black Blade. Malekith's? On the night of the dire plot, Ranni rewarded Praetor Rykard with these traces. She didn't need them anymore. Should the coming trespass one day transpire, they would serve as a last resort foil, allowing Rykard to challenge Malekith the Black Blade, the black beast of destined death, who could eat even the sun. wielding the power of Aqua Regia, of course. So with that, I think we have fully encapsulated all that is both of the reds, red gold and red blood. We've even got the red of destined death, which is gold turning into blood right in the middle. Look at that. Yeah. That piece of the Elden ring, you can see that there's a piece that was removed. Yeah, there's several pieces that were removed. But people have noticed that the rune of destined death looks like it was removed. Where does it look like it was removed from? Does it look to you like Marika was literally transformed into a rune in order to replace what she removed? Like that was her karmic fate? Do you think that's what it is to sin? I don't know. All I know is this claw is blasphemous, and if you work hard enough, you can find any outer god. Even one of your own. All you need are the horns for it. Just be careful to find an outer god that you don't need Miquella to remove eventually. That's going to be a whole thing, honestly. Just try not to break physics again just because you forgot that your own golden hue comes from red at some point, and that frightens you to see that there is a visible origin to your existence. It's going to be okay. You're gold, they're red, you're the same thing anyways. Who fucking cares? Try not to have a goddamn crusade over it the next time you wake up and your hair's turned red, huh? Anyways, thank you for watching this far. If you liked the video, please check out the description for my sources. I didn't do the same thing as last time where I made a video just reading out. I can do that again. If you'd like me to do that, feel free to comment. But I didn't prepare it this time because it's it's not just one paper. I would have to read at least a review, and reviews are a lot longer than single articles, and I'm picking my battles. Thank you to Omster for not only making Worm Guy, but now Promised Consort Cage. I hope I did a better job of working my sources into the middle of the video this time. I still have like 50 that I'm sitting on that I just kind of have to eat shit on those now. As they say, it's content for a future video. Anyways, I am going to note under Blasphemous Claw use, just to round this one out, it can parry specific melee attacks from Malekith, and his sword will briefly glow yellow before the attacks that can be parried, rather than white. Imagine that. White like light, yellow like gold. I wonder if there's a connection there between the runes and death. I mean, the rings represent death, don't they? There's probably something to that. I'm like begging Nightreign not to actually include any real lore. Please, 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 please. Oh, right. I've almost forgot. So, I started this off by talking about something illusory, right? The bloom, the crucible bloom, and how it relates to gold and the Erd tree. The Erd tree being a nominally illusory tree. You know, it's not made of real gold, at least not on the outside. What's important is that it is an illusion. So, what else is illusory? How many other illusions could we make with this faith? Well, let's see. Black Blade. Power gleaned from the remembrance of Malekith. Caster creates an illusory black blade, then leaps forward to deliver a spinning slash that emits a wave of light. This can be followed up with one additional attack. It very visibly resembles the Rings of Light, honestly, as well as the Moonlight Blade, which is also said to be a piece of light. An arc. This blade was once imbued with destined death. In addition to dealing damage, it reduces foes' maximum HP and continues to sap their HP for a very short time. Sap is an interesting choice of words. And finally, the Black Sun itself, Malekith's Black Blade. Malekith's Black Blade, which once harbored the power of the Rune of Death. a sad shadow of its former glory, almost like a shadow of the Erd Tree. After a fragment of death was stolen on that fateful night, Malekith bound the blade within his own flesh, such that none might ever rob death again. And so, too, did Marika bind her rune within her own flesh to keep it safe. Malekith is her shadow, after all. Who would have thought Marika and Marikesu would be so similar? As one final note, the actual use of Destined Death visually resembles how you use the Golden Crux. You plunge both of them into the ground and summon a myriad of attacks. I can see why you would see the Golden Order in that crux. So do you see the Golden Order in the Rune of Destined Death as well? I think I do. If you'd like the video and would like to support what I'm doing here, I have a Ko-Fi, which is in the description, and I'll put it on screen now. And don't donate if you don't have any money to spare. But if you have anything, and you like the video, I like eating. So I think we can find a middle ground there. And I'll appreciate it greatly. I'll put your name in the credits if you like. I don't have to if you'd rather I didn't, but I figure if someone's donated, they should go in the credits if they want. On that note, I'd also like to thank Digital Beef, without whom I would not be able to have paid my bills this month, particularly groceries. And if you want to stay tuned for my next video, I'm going to be making it on silver, purple, and blue, and those connotations in Elden Ring. So hit the subscribe button if you want to see that. Thanks for watching to the end of the video, and I hope you have a wonderful, happy new year. Hope 2025 is better to you than presumably 2024 was. Stay safe out there, take care, and drink more water. You're probably not drinking enough water. Drink more. Now, there was a lot more I could do, and I might do another red video in the future, just because of how much I had to just really gloss over in order to make this into anything resembling a coherent thesis, but I'll leave you with this at least. If you check anything that's made of amber, have you ever wondered how that connects to the grace of gold and to the Erd Tree? I mean, it makes enough sense in terms of amber and trees, but how does that connect to gold exactly? And why would that also connect to, hypothetically, dragons and lightning? What am I going on about with that, one might say? To which I would say, first, they're filled with gold and they use bright red lightning. And second, and far more importantly, the nomenclature of amber. Specifically, amber not only led to the coinage of the term electricity, which we were discussing conductivity earlier, so that's pretty relevant. And as one final science note, I'm just going to briefly mention that the history of Electrum is broadly that it was mistaken for gold in most situations, because refining true gold just takes incredible amounts of resources, and it's kind of a diminished return. Not really worth it. So most gold historically was actually Electrum. And you can see that throughout history with gold coins that are actually Electrum coins. Fun fact, Electrum, it was probably named on account of its yellow color. It was recorded by Pliny, the ancient Roman historian, and its etymological origin is the Greek word for amber. Electrum literally gets its name from amber, and amber also coined the term electricity. How fun is that? Guess there's something to that, where if you have Electrum, you have a state of intense conductivity, and that can bring energy in the form of electricity, or maybe even light and heat. It just becomes more conductive. The only thing that you would really want to worry about if your world is actually made of Electrum is melting it, because it might separate, and then people would start to notice that there's a silver portion. Speaking of separating portions, this is around where the gold video ends. However, that's a little bit of a lead into the silver video. stay tuned for that one. It'll be fun. That one's going to be about silver, blue, and I'm going to also talk about a bit of overlap with color purple. This is editing Jenny coming back in and noting that, so all of my hypothesizing about the crucible being connected to gold, I'm just going to read the Divine Bird Feathers description, and you tell me. A technique of the Divine Bird Warriors, the very first of all horned warriors, wielded as an incantation. Spread the arms wide like wings to release a flurry of feathers. This incantation can be cast while in motion. Hold to continue releasing feathers. The Divine Bird Warriors, and indeed this technique, are said to bear resemblance to the Golden Crucible. It is also one of the Spiral Tower incantations. So in summary, the Crucible is directly connected to gold and red both, because what it does is it melts down gold. It takes the tree and it takes it down to its base elements. It regresses them back to those, and then it begins the chain of causality again, allowing them to start from new seeds, bud, and then begin to grow. And those buds start off red before they eventually ripen into gold. And like we can see in the proximity of the Prince of Death, like we can see with the congealed putrescence, like with Trina, like with all sorts of things, like with the worm guys. Given enough time, even gold tarnishes back into purple, because what's happening is it experiences enough incident energy in order to etch the surface. And if that surface gets etched, if the gold manages to get unseated and melted and has to reorganize itself, it's going to form nanostructures, and those nanostructures are going to be wine red, purple, or red. So we can see that trees begin at red, like blood, and then they grow into great golden trees, and then eventually they rot back into red buds once more. No wonder a normalized crucible current bears so much resemblance to the flame torrents that can pour out of the heads of those, whatever they're called, the golems, the furnace golems, those things. That's going to be a whole other can of worms, isn't it? Also, yes, I know I mentioned verdigris in the presence of a green and red video. I am going to be following up on red with copper. That'll be the copper red stuff. But I tried in this episode to capture everything with primordial gold that I could. If you feel like anything was left out, do feel free to comment and I'll try to respond to it. But in all likelihood, I'm aware of it, and I just did not find a way to fit it into this episode, even though it is all connected. It just felt clunky, and I really had to narrow this one down over several edits. So I hope by now you can tell that essentially what happened with the Erd tree is that it came along, it found the amber of the great tree and the spiral tree, and it regarded that to be an enviable sort of gold. It stole it for itself, the two entwined, and over time, as the Erd tree leaked its abundance and it was distributed, it was extracted. The order of the Erd tree, in an orderly manner, removed that gold, all in the name of the Golden Order, while the Shaggy tree bore the bill, the toll, the brunt of that process. And so it twisted up into an image far removed from gold, as far removed from order as a twilight sunset. Isn't it funny how much the omens resemble the lamenters? And it's said that they too bore an audience with the divine. How fascinating. I wonder what the divine really means. After all, verdigris was said to be a gift from the outer gods. Is it that every metal that is not gold is an outer god? What does a god even mean? And, for that matter, what exactly does that make rot? Considering it too is an outer god, and it requires unalloyed gold in order to bloom, using the evidence that we see if we kill Millicent at the end of her process. I also never knew this, but that leaves Gowry dead in what looks like some sort of ecstatic state. I wonder what exactly the servants of Rot get out of this whole thing. I suppose that'll be for the other Red video, won't it? Also, if you're here to make a comment about my voice or my gender or both, my name is Jennifer, and my gender is a worm that is also a clown. Thank you for your time. May chaos take the world. May chaos take the water.